I am here with my guest for today, Carol Ruth Silver. Hey, Carol.
Hello there. How are you, Ralph?
What an introduction. How are you? I feel like I know you. We talked briefly off the air a few times, and I feel like I've known you for 100 years.
Ta-da!
So, that's really nice. And as I mentioned, and I didn't say it lightly, you are one of my heroines in life. You're a freedom fighter, and you wrote a book about it.
I did.
I want to get to, as well as an incredibly interesting, eclectic life with much to talk about. I want to make sure that we talk first about your experiences as a freedom writer and what brought you to writing the book and what you got out of it, what how it's been cathartic for you to put it all out there. But first, let me tell the audience that 2 years ago there was a 60th anniversary, and
50th,
you and others
50th.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
and you and others appeared on Oprah Winfrey on the show, not on Oprah, of course, silly me, but on the show, and I think that's what pretty much inspired you to complete the book. Am I correct?
Nope, not at all. The book was totally independent.
Long before, Carol. We've agreed on that, so I'm going to let you go with it. You tell me.
Well, the book is called Freedom Rider Diary, R-I-D-E-R, Freedom Rider Diary, and is exactly that. It is the diary that I kept when I was a freedom rider 52 years now ago. And
right.
At that time, freedom riders, as I hope people remember, were groups of both African American and non-African American people who rode around in the segregated South of the United States in commercial buses. That is, we didn't charter a bus to go down to Jackson, Mississippi, and challenge the segregation laws. We got on a bus that was going there anyway, and we bought our tickets and we got on. And those people who were involved, there were a total of about 435 freedom riders by the time it was all done, which is a very small number when you think about it, because we really, really changed the world, changed America and changed the world. But we were attacked. The first bus was attacked and burned, and an effort was made by the Ku Klux Klan, who were leading the group of white people who were attacking the bus. And an effort was made to burn the bus and everybody who was on the bus and kill them. So it was not nice.
Not met with cake and cookies and come to our party.
Exactly. So then the second bus wound up in Birmingham, and the Ku Klux Klan surrounded a church where the Freedom Riders and Martin Luther King and Ralph Abernathy and other freedom fighters were having a church service, and they threatened to firebomb and burn down that church with all those people, now about 1,500 people inside this church, both the freedom riders, who were some black and some white, and the rest of this group of people who were all African American. So that was the point at which the Attorney General of the United States, Bobby Kennedy, sent the National Guard in to rescue the people in the church. And many people at that point said, oh, the freedom rides are over, terrible things almost happened, but at least we can all go back to where we were before. Unfortunately for that idea, however, CORE, Congress of Racial Equality, put out a call in New York City and across the country by radio saying the freedom rides will continue. We are recruiting volunteers from the north to go down to Alabama and Mississippi and continue to challenge segregation in public transportation. And that is where I, along with a lot of other people, joined in, got on those buses, challenged what was happening in the South, went for nonviolent training, made our wills, because that was one of the requirements. You had to make your will before you were allowed to participate, because if you should happen to be killed, it was important to be able to say to your family who you were, or to know who your family was, etc.
And that was a very real possibility, very real for my brother's campmate at the camp I attended for many, many years, Andrew Goodman.
Yes, for Andrew Goodman, who, along with two other people, a young man named James Cheney, I think it was James. Anyway, Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner were three civil rights workers in Neshoba County, Mississippi, who were murdered by these Klansmen in the year 1964. The Freedom Rides were in 1961 and had a tremendous impact, but there was still this kind of resistance to integration particularly in Mississippi. So in any event, back to my book, it was, and I don't mean to slough over what happened to Andy Goodman.
No, not at all. He was our camp hero, and folks like him and you are to be thanked by society for making this a better world for us to live. So on behalf of folks, thank you
but the
very
book
much.
itself, which has been the focus of my almost full-time efforts for the last 2 years, was not started by the Oprah show, but rather was in process at that time. It had been seen by the It was seen by a reporter in Jackson, Mississippi, in the archives of Tougaloo College, a black college in Jackson, where I had given a copy of it 10 years before at the 40th reunion, which I organized in Jackson and at Tougaloo for Freedom Riders. And 50th anniversaries are always much bigger, and the 50th anniversary came along, and that's when I started really working on this. And when the publisher, the University Press of Mississippi, decided that they would publish it. And so I've been working with them ever since.
That is really very nice and a testament to Mississippi.
It is. It is a testament to those who have come after, those who have reconciled with the terrible things that happened under segregation, under apartheid in America, and who now are able to do things like publish a book such as this.
Right. Moving on, which is always the way it's supposed to happen. Let's put it that way. what's it been like for you reaching people who weren't even around at that time, and talking to them about freedom riders? That how's that affected you, and how much fun has that been? Let's put it that way. Has it been fun for you to educate these people?
It is interesting. It is intense, and sometimes it is fun. It is certainly it's better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, as my uncle
But sometimes not by much. Is that what? But sometimes not by much.
Sometimes not by much. Yes.
Okay.
It's painful to talk to some young people who say, I never heard of the Freedom Rides, and particularly African American kids who say that, because they've been denied a whole history of their own place in the world, because the schools nowadays don't adequately teach them their own history. This book is going to be available for book signings and for my giving these little talks that go with book signings very shortly, and I am very excited about that opportunity, the opportunity to talk to kids and just almost random people about what it was like in those days.
Well, as far as book signings, I want you to start here in the Bay Area and work your way out. So I'm gonna put you with a fellow named Jerry at Books Inc. in Alameda, and he's launched a bunch of folks, that who are newly published and who are getting the word out. So I think Books Inc. is a good start. They not just the one in Alameda, but all over the Bay Area. There are about 9 of them, and so that would be nice, because I'd like to come and go to one of your signings and take some pictures, and I think it would be great.
Well, as a matter of fact, the first of these book signings is going to be at Books Inc., the one in San Francisco at Laurel Village. And it will...
We did not talk about this. This is really very, very interesting. We didn't talk about Books Inc. before.
Right. Books Inc. is a very, very important independent bookseller here in San Francisco, and I've long been a fan of theirs, and I have one of those little cards that says, after you've bought 10 books, you get to have one for free.
Right. But
and I've collected my free books a number of times.
Hey, listen, they have the same deal with me, but only they throw in a box of crayons if I buy. So.
Yes, indeed. So, yes, well, thank you very much for that suggestion, for the suggestion of talking to somebody named Jerry over in Alameda Books, Inc. I would like to.
You tell him Zig sent you, and he'll set you up really good, because he happens to be an African American gentleman, but notwithstanding, your book deserves all the recognition and all the publicity it could possibly get.
Well, thank you so much.
A myriad of reasons, and can't let you go without covering at least a few of the other exciting things that happened over the course of your lifetime.
Oh, sure.
And I wouldn't be me unless I went for the thing that I'm most curious about. You were allegedly a target of Dan White's in San Francisco when
George Moscone and Harvey Milk were shot.
Were assassinated.
Yes, I can accurately say that I am allegedly was a target. I certainly never heard that from Dan White myself, that information was given by the police officer who was a friend of Dan White's, who took his initial confession and lobbed all these softball questions at him to give him as much as possible the opportunity to justify why he went and shot and killed two men in cold blood. And that police officer, many years later, after Dan White had himself had killed himself after he got out of prison, at that point, that police officer called a reporter here in San Francisco and said, I want to tell you something, and made this statement, said that Dan White had told him that he was also looking for me and Willie Brown when he was on his murderous rampage, and that his comment about me was, and Carol Ruth Silver, she was the biggest snake of them all. Now, I can't say that I'm exactly proud to have had that said of me, even by a murderer, but Dan White greatly mistook the efforts that I made, because I was a supervisor elected at the same time as Harvey Milk and as Dan White, and I sat between the two of them at the meetings of the Board of Supervisors. And on my right was Harvey Milk, and on my left, not politically, but on my left was Dan White. And when matters came before the board, I was always trying to kind of mediate among the members of the board, trying to see where the votes were. If there were not going to be 6 votes for something, then we should table it, send it to committee, not bother with it, not waste any time on it. If there were 4 votes for and 4 votes against, and it looked like there might be it might be worthwhile to have a debate and to see if we could persuade some of our colleagues, then I would go from colleague to colleague and say, well, what do you need to see in the amendments to this bill that would convince you to vote for it? And that's what I used to do with Dan and Harvey. I would say to Harvey, you're against this bill. What is it that you would want to see in it if we, to get your vote? And then I'd say to Dan, you're for this bill. Are you willing to give up these things in order to get the vote of Harvey, who would vote for it if these changes were made? And that kind of negotiation was something that I was skilled at, that I enjoyed, that I did all the time. And, different legislators, different people in political office do different things. Some people are proposers.
Right,
some
you would
people
bring
are
them together, mediate,
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that has to be even more shocking, because you were not diametrically opposed to him in his own mind when you were...
Well, I was in his mind. I certainly was not in my mind.
While you were doing it, while it was going on, way before this happened, you wonder what goes on in someone's mind.
I don't think he was hostile at that time. But what happened, the big issue for Dan White was a NIMBY issue. In his district, in his part of the Ingleside part of San Francisco, there was great resistance on a not-in-my-backyard basis to a drug rehabilitation center being located there. even though the drug rehabilitation center was only going to serve, or at least was it was being talked about as a condition, that it would only serve kids whose families also lived in the same neighborhood. So the not in my backyard people won the day with Dan White, and he said to them, "Don't worry, if you elect me to the Board of Supervisors, I will stop this drug center from coming into your neighborhood." And then he got to the Board of Supervisors, and he was elected, and he found out that it takes 6 votes to do anything. And there was I don't think there was a single other vote, maybe there was one other, to oppose this drug rehab center. It was a very, very good and reasonable and needed thing. And so he was unable to stop it, which then embarrassed him in front of his constituents, and he transferred his anger at the entire board to a feeling of anger at Harvey and George. And then subsequently, he, for reasons totally unconnected to this issue, he resigned from the board and wanted to rescind that resignation and to have the mayor, and was told by the city attorney that no, you cannot rescind it, but the mayor can reappoint you. And then he applied to the mayor to reappoint him. The mayor said no. Dan blamed Harvey, and I guess also me and Willie Brown, for the fact that the mayor would not reappoint him, and thus came tragedy.
Wow. His defense, for those of you who aren't San Franciscoites, was known as the Twinkie defense, and that got some notoriety.
Well, yes, and the Twinkie defense was that because he had been eating sugar snacks like Twinkies,
right,
he had lost his rational capacity. He was temporarily insane based on his ingesting sugar snacks, and therefore should not be found guilty of murder in the first degree.
Okay, and that's what got him off, at least convicted on the second degree.
Exactly.
And he was able to see the light of day again, which in itself is miraculous if one stops to think about it. Also, he got no help in prison. He got no psychological help, obviously, or not enough.
I think that's probably true. That is undoubtedly true, because at that time, the notion that people who are in prison are mostly going to get out again and are going to have with them the same psychological problems that they had that got them in there in the first place, that concept had not yet become firm in the world. Today, we look at people who are in jail and we divide them into 2 categories, or at least those of us who have worked in the criminal justice field. One category is people who are essentially mentally dysfunctional and need treatment, need care, sometimes need to be incarcerated forever because there is no cure for what ails them. And the other part of the vast numbers of people who are in jail are what I call political prisoners, people who are there solely because we have bad drug laws in the United States. We prohibit drugs for no good reason particularly marijuana, and we put into jail people who have been caught violating those laws in the same way that the majority of Americans violate those laws, but just happen to get caught.
Right. And sometimes if you get caught and you've got big money, that helps in today's justice system as well.
Yes, that is true. That is true.
And that,
unfortunately,
you see that changing?
Sadly, that is outrageous, but it is true.
Do you see that changing? Is there any way, sometimes I think, wow, if it's still this way, if money buys a place in heaven, quote, and if money buys getting off from horrible crimes and this, that, and the other thing, or buys getting off from crimes that if you didn't have money you wouldn't get off from. I mean, that how can it change if the people that are going to change the laws are the ones that are already in power?
I think that the current experience, the thing that is happening currently, which is that marijuana is being legalized for all purposes in a number of states, has previously been legalized for medical purposes in a number of states, that these things are finally beginning to turn around the political prisoner syndrome with regard to marijuana. But I still do not see the rest of the so-called war on drugs, which is continuing to go on. I do not see that as mitigating, and that is really, really sad.
Yeah, it said not just the lives lost, but the money that could go elsewhere that's put into this could go for counseling, could go for prescribing people, meeting their needs.
Absolutely. But pretty soon we'll have marijuana to tax and regulate, and that should bring the deficit down, let alone begin to
contribute to it. And in a sense, it's really not fair, given the history of the herb, to have it called a drug all these years, and then when those that called it a drug need it for their convenience to bolster revenue for city government and what have you, now all of a sudden it's okay. In a sense, it's not fair.
Well, I don't agree with that analysis, but I'm happy to have marijuana regulated rather than criminalized. I'm not unhappy to have it taxed.
I would like to see it decriminalized across the board and regulated at a fair price that everybody does well on it, not the prices that are set by the regulators.
Well, that's true too, and that will happen because commerce is, as Adam Smith had taught us at the beginning of the capitalist era, is by a willing seller and a willing buyer, and the price is set in the nexus of their conversation. And up in Humboldt County, you know where that is. That's north of San Francisco.
Oh, yes.
Where a great deal of very, very good marijuana has been grown for many years. The local.
I do tell Carol Ruth Silver.
Falling.
Yes, I know. Yes, and but
the prices
flooded.
are falling yes. dramatically because of the lack of fear of people coming into the marketplace and being willing to have a few pots of marijuana or to sell some of their product. So the prices are coming down, and they're coming down sharply and dramatically, and pretty soon the prices of marijuana in relationship to the amount of what shall we say, therapeutic kind of effect will probably be about the same as alcohol or tobacco, which is as it should be.